I think for me personally, I remember just distinctly we were talking about gates on one of our episodes, and Trent dropped some knowledge about his relationship to the left hand gate ball, where for my whole life I've been focused on right hand gate ball. And I just remember when he was dropping his, he was just going on his normal tangent. But for me, I'm sitting there and like I just want to hit the boom button like 20 times, so people can just hear or the train horn going on like boom. This is it. And
Hello, and welcome back or welcome to the Water Ski Podcast. This is Matteo, your host, and the goal of this podcast is to promote water skiing. Recreational water skiing, professional water skiing, competitive water skiing, amateur water skiing. We promote water skiing here. That's the goal. And I'm glad that this episode features two high-level skiers and coaches who share that vision in their own podcast. So you might have guessed, I'm speaking of Rossi and Trent Finlayson, the hosts of Spraymaker. So Spraymaker had a very successful season 1 last year in 2020, and they're about to launch season 2 next Monday, so March 15th. So we thought it was a good idea to sort of catch up, speak about podcasting, speak about skiing, and talk also about podcasting about skiing. So it was a very fun episode to record. I truly love how the two feed off each other so well in their show. So it was fun to sort of jump in as a third person and just have a fun conversation. This conversation at this episode is, again, this week brought to you by Real Frequency College Consulting. If you're a parent of a collegiate-bound water skier, this is an exciting and stressful time. It's common to become overwhelmed with the admission process, college research, deadlines, essays, and picking the perfect college ski club culture. Let's face it, they're all pretty awesome. I mean, they have water skiing. Why would they not? Are you and your student making the best decisions to increase success and mitigate risk? Real Frequency is with you every step of the way. With weekly contact and face-to-face consultations, Real Frequency ensures your student is held accountable so that you don't have to. Real Frequency offers comprehensive college reports on over 6,400 institutions and extensive info on NCWSA-affiliated schools. Real Frequency is there for career path guidance, the connector of internships, and career research. As a result, your student graduates on time with a career, so they can afford to pull you skiing in their boat sooner. Real Frequency also offers financial planning from a college economic specialist and access to your very own admission essay specialist. And there's so much more. And I'm glad they offer financial planning because some institutions have scholarship for skiers, some don't. So it's good for incoming freshmen to have a good idea of their finances. This process can feel like running your hardest pass. Let Real Frequency take on the stress of admission so you can enjoy the course. You can go on realfrequency.com, that's REAL frequency.com, or you can call 509-992-2888 and schedule your free consultation. Real Frequency. The stress isn't worth it, but a college consultant is. So if you want your little TWSP perk, you can say TWSP whenever you contact Real Frequency, or you can apparently say Matteo is the man, and you receive 6% off for 6 to 12 months benefit. So again, realfrequency.com, or you can call 509-992-2888. All right, let's just jump into this chat. It's not properly an interview. Yes, I did questions. I did have questions, but I sensed that it was just a good chat about podcasting and water skiing. So let's just jump in. Enjoy. All right, guys. Hey, welcome to the Water Ski Podcast. Thank you for deciding to do this. Trent, Rossi, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, man.
Look, I'm stoked to talk to you guys first and foremost about your podcast. Primarily because I've been a pretty, committed listener. I've even been caught listening to it while driving trick skiing and got, scolded about that. But I think you guys came up with a great product. So I'm sure we will talk about that throughout this little chat. Where are you guys calling from? I mean, obviously this is all remote.
Mm-hmm. I'm at home in on Guadalupe Skiplex, just south of Austin, Texas.
Wow. Yeah, I'm calling in from Salt Lake City, Utah, and we're getting ready for another season coming up pretty soon. Getting pretty excited about it.
Lake frozen, Rossi, or water?
The lake goes from frozen to unfrozen right now because our lakes they're not that deep. So you'll go from like, oh, we're way away from being able to ski, and then the next day you see guys out at the lake getting hardcore and using their dry suits and getting nuts. So yeah, we're still in that kind of realm where we're getting a lot of snow here in the mountains, but Salt Lake City is such a great place in the spring just because you've got snow in the mountains and it can still be spring in the valley. So we're starting to see our flowers start to pop up, and this is the time of year I love the beginning of the season, man. There's nothing like the start to another season. So it's just, we're all trying to get better here, and Trent and I'm sure you're the same. You just get fired up, and I think the word that always pops in my head is possibilities. This is the time of just, hopefully we can reach a newer high than we ever reached, and hopefully we can learn some new things along the way that make skiing, sometimes we call it the blackout, where you don't know quite different aspects of your skiing. Like, we're just trying to fill those in and just try to evolve as skiers. And whether you're an open water skier or a course skier or a high level, professional, I think the beginning of the season is just, it's the best. It's the best.
It is. And it's funny how, I started skiing 3 weeks ago as soon as ice melted, and, there's another fellow highly competitive skier here with me, and we were just talking about things, we had the time to change because tournaments here won't start until June. So, oh man, I get to work 3 months on these two movements. Great. Let's do it,
Hey, that's funny. That's funny you mentioned that, because Rossi and I just got done recording an episode of Spraymakers, and we talked at length about this time of year that, when you can, with very little pressure and hopefully, controlled expectation, you can dive in and you can make real lasting change.
Yep, you certainly can. And then, it's funny how you play that balance game of, okay, it's cold, I can't stay in the water too long, but I get to do this drill or that pass that hopefully, if I do it correctly, it'll help me. And, it's funny, we've been recording for 3 minutes, and I feel I'm already in a Spraymaker episode, because that's the feel of your episodes. You guys just talk skiing in high depth, and yet it's approachable by anyone. I had people coming through ski school that listened to your podcast, and they came to learn how to do the course. And they would follow up, and certainly, I'm at a different level, and I love your episodes. So how did you guys come up with the idea? Like, when did you start talking about it?
Well, I guess I'll get started, then Rossi, you can explain, how it all came to fruition in the end. But it was something, I'd been kicking it around a little bit, and I had a friend in Canada that I coached that had been pressuring me to do it, and then really, Brooks Wilson, president of Radar, he just sort of presented I think we need this, and I think you guys are the guys to do it. What did you think right away, Rossi? Though, it was for me personally, it was a little bit, the thought of trying to do 30, 40 episodes a year was a little bit intimidating, or a little bit daunting anyway.
Well, we're definitely I think the strong part of Spraymakers really is that we are unscripted in what we do. And so really what we're capturing is, just Trent and I talking about skiing. We've been doing this for a really long time. The way I look at it as a coach, you take these really intricate and in-depth concepts, but then when you're on the water, things happen so fast. They have to be, you have to be able to relate to these things in such an easy and approachable fashion, or you're not going to be able to do them. So I think one of the things I love listening to Trent talk when we're on these episodes, just because we're speaking the same coaching techniques, but the way that Trent goes about it and the way that I go about it are a little bit different. And then we're able to throw it back and forth in I'd like to say we're evolved coaches. So these concepts that are really, really intricate and high level are actually approachable, and they're approachable from the free skier standpoint all the way through the, high level pro athlete type of thing. And 30 episodes a year is, we're learning as we go. I bet if you go back and listen to our first 10, we were, there's a lot more ums and hesitations and just trying to figure it out. But I think that's kind of the beauty of it. And, when we first started talking about Spraymakers and doing this, I couldn't think of a better person to do it with than Trent. He and I are buds off the water and on the water, and we always look forward to being together. And he's got a great group of skiers down there in Texas that he gets to work with, and I've worked with tons of people in Florida when I was running ski school, and I've evolved out of that a little bit. So for me, this is a way for me to get back into doing a part of skiing for me that is the most important. It's kind of always been the most important, and that is helping people to get to their goals in water skiing, because we all love to ski and we all want to I think we all want to get better and see where it goes. So when Brooks approached me and got Trent on, and we were chatting about it, it was like, this sounds great. And really our only rule was no rules. It was just come into it unscripted, don't think about it, just talk about it, keep it light, but also jump into these higher level concepts.
Yeah, for sure. And I can testify that you like to talk skiing, because the couple of times that I came to ski with you in Orlando, there was a lot of talking before the set and after the set. I can certainly attest to that. And what I find interesting in your episodes, and I certainly noticed how you guys define it as season one, like you're recording a new season now.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right.
That's how we're calling it.
Yeah. So in season one, yes, obviously things got better as the episodes progressed, because that's just the nature of doing things. But I always noticed this pattern, which I found really entertaining, that you guys would start with a concept and it would go, Trent says his thing, you, Rossi, say yours. And then eventually by the end of the episode, you come to realize that you're converging on the same thing, right?
Yes. Yep.
And it's super cool, because I think that's what happens in water skiing at the lake, right? Like three people might tell you the same thing three different way, but then it resonates with person B, and then you get to improve.
I think maybe even like through that method, I think inadvertently we reach our goal of truly like teaching a concept instead of instructing it. You know what I mean? Just like you said, we're going to go in these divergent paths, and then, either Rossi or I or both of us, we both have a habit of like going way down these dark holes, but then we're going to reconverge and then end up with this, we usually end up with a bit of a bow on it. But again, I think like when you hear it in that manner, I think you actually can learn a concept instead of just being told what to do.
It feels like hear it from
exactly. Like by the time Rossi and I are done an episode, I feel the same way that I feel at the end of a set that I'm coaching. Like there's a lot of conversation, a lot of reciprocity, and all of a sudden it's like, I feel like we got somewhere. It's
right.
They're nice little coaching sessions from my living room. It's and that's why it's so enjoyable.
Yeah.
What has been your experience, Chris? Because like to me, just by hearing Trent, but even personally doing this podcast, it's a lot of fun, you know, like I do a different thing. I interview, I speak to people, to skiers, and it's just a conversation that if I didn't have a podcast, I would have had anyway, you know, like it's just good fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the key really, is that, I think Trent kind of hit it on the head, that we're trying to bring people along on this journey, but we don't necessarily, like, there isn't one way. And I think that's the thing, like, you know, as a coach, when you first start coaching, I mean, I don't know, I want to say I lucked into coaching and whatever. Dave Good gave me a chance a long time ago. I got to give him lots of thanks. You know, I was like a 22 or 23-year-old kid coming out of college, and he basically handed me the reins to a 3-lake facility and said, go. You know,
wow.
and so, yeah, I mean, I went to school for business, but I mean, once you start to do those things, you kind of, you know, have to jump in, and so you go through these growth periods as a coach, and at first you just want everybody to do exactly what you're doing. And as you stay in the game longer and longer, you realize that it's not so important to tell everybody or to show everybody exactly what you're trying to do with your skiing. It's about understanding the global techniques of slalom. You know, we're slalom ski guys, but to understand those techniques and then to look at a person, identify with where they're at in their skiing, and then be able to give them their most potent you know, concepts or whatever. And that's all I've always wanted to do, was to just kind of educate people and help them fill in what I call those black holes, you know, those places where if you were to write down, like, okay, I pull out from my gates, and then, you know, what are you doing, and how intricate can you get with what you're supposed to be doing? Where should the handle be? Where should everything be? And then turning in for your gates. And, you know, it's like, you're going to get to a place where you're like, oh, and then I edge change. And you're like, well, no, that's not exactly what happens. When you edge change, what happens? Well, yeah, the ski just goes from side to side. No, that's not technically. There are things that led up to that, and there are things that go on beyond that. And so if that's a place for you, that's your black hole. Like, so that's what you don't know. And anytime that you don't know in your mind already what you need to do, you will not be able to either highlight, focus, or improve on those things when you're on the water. So really, for me, it's always been about understanding from, you know, I like to use the term 30,000 feet. You know, you gotta understand your concepts before you're even on the water. And then a coach really helps you when you're on the water to identify your weakest link and to give you new focus and to try to fill that in. But I think most of the really important things that you need to improve on in your skiing come off the water. They come through understanding. They come through, you know, these kind of conversations that Trent and I have. And I think that's one of the reasons why people kind of like it. And, you know, it's fun. I get to the lake and, you know, there people show up. We all here in Utah, you got to drive to the lakes. Most people don't live at the lake that they ski. So people are rolling into the lake like, oh, I was listening to this episode of Spraymakers. You totally blew my mind with tournament preparedness or whatever it is. So it's kind of fun because now people that would generally come to the lake and just take their ski set are actually putting some effort into evolving and understanding and really wanting to get better. And I think that's our ultimate goal, is just to help people to realize their goals.
With, if I may say, with a little bit of discipline added, because I think the difference there is, you know, as Trent said, there's that educational component, because at least at my lake or any lake that I've been, people talk skiing all the time on the dock, as they get out of the car, you know, like, but then it's so easy, I would say, because of the complexity of slalom skiing, to get into dark holes, right? And just focus on the wrong thing or overthink it or overdo it. And you know, and I like how those who are actually now starting to listen to this get at least a little bit of discipline in their thinking, right? Which I think is crucial. And there's a lot of experience that can be, you know, not be wasted by getting good education and good instruction. I have a question for you guys, because you obviously coach extensively as I do. And Trent might remember this question because I asked him when I interviewed him, but what part of your coaching are you working on now or lately, what you've been working on lately? Something that you noticed, needs a bit of improvement, or if you only could do that, it would help your athletes. Have you noticed any of that?
I mean, there's been a few over the years, but the last couple of years, like for me, and I don't start here, but every level needs to be able to address their role in relation to the boat. Your relationship with the boat is everything in the end, right? I mean, it's not, that's why I always tell people, like, I mean, it's obvious, but the course is static, right? The course isn't the hard part, right? Or if you had a self-propelled water ski, how simple would this be, right? So, and that was the one for me. It started about 5 years ago, and it was just like how over the last like 30 years, how has no one ever talked to me about the boat? Where am I in relation to the boat? What's the boat doing in relation to me? When is it happening? At what rate is it happening? Because, like, in the end, you can oversimplify things, but in the end, what could possibly be more important than where the boat is at specific points of the turn, at specific points of you moving into the load, and how fast is that happening? Like that determines everything. Your speed in relation to the boat speed at various parts of the course, that's everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
this
like how you mentioned.
This is why I like this is why I like working with Trent, because continually he inspires me to want to ski more. I mean, I just the way that like thinking about that relationship, like that's not necessarily my MO. It's not really the way I necessarily in the past have thought about it. But then Trent opens these new ways of thinking about it. And then when I'm out there on the water doing my own thing, that those qualities come in, and I start to think, I wouldn't say maybe more like Trent, but it changes the way that I approach things and do it. And for me, I think just the lack of game plan for most people is what just really sets things off, and that's one of the reasons why when you listen to Spraymakers and you listen to us talk, we're always having a plan. Every set counts. That doesn't mean that every set isn't fun. You know what I mean? Like my least favorite sets in a year are the ones where I ski into the dock and I evaluate. I always evaluate how my set went, and I go, I didn't think of anything, I didn't accomplish anything. What did I just do? And then I realized I just skied, but I didn't ski with any intention or a lack of focus or whatever. So, I think one of the things that we try to make sure we keep in check for people is to have a game plan, and that doesn't mean that it's not fun, but you have to have intention, and you have to have, we just don't, I mean, we talk about this a lot. You don't have enough turns, enough cuts in a season. I can make 1,000 turns on my snow skis in a day. How many sets is it going to take you to do 1,000, turns on a water ski? You know what I mean? So ultimately just having a game plan, making sure that you set that game plan. For me, I have to warm up before I ski. I go for a run. That gets my blood flowing. It also tells my brain, like, hey, buddy, you're about to get going. My body knows as soon as I go for that run type of thing. So whatever that is, make sure that you have a game plan. And being a pro skier like you are, Matteo, and a phenomenal skier as you are, you do this, and you probably do most of this without even really consciously thinking of it. But most of our listeners, I think that that's an aspect that they just don't apply, and thus they leave buoys or turns on the table.
Yeah. And for sure. No, I sometimes go back and think about my pre-performance routine and see if it's in check or not. And what I mean by that is it bringing me to a place that will allow me to perform at my best? And what I noticed is that those two were different between practice and competition, and I had to realign them so that when I went to competition, my pre-performance routine was just the usual. It wasn't something odd that I did because I was at a competition, Now, for me personally, it's kind of like sticking to the same thing. Sometimes you have that feeling that you have to continuously give things to a student just because they came to ski for 2 weeks. But at the same time, sometimes like that's the issue they have to work on, and you're much better off be boring, but make sure that they work on it for 2 weeks than give them something else so that they get excited about learning something else. That's something I've been struggling with, you know, like particularly with, I don't know how to define this, like mid-level skiers, you know, for lack of a better word. Yeah. Like the high-end skier gets it. Like that's what I need to work on. Thank you. Let's do 15 sets working on that. The low-level skiers also gets it because they think, well, what do I know? So you tell me. The mid-skier, you feel that need of giving them that little extra of like, oh, think about this as well, or try that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then what happens at the end of that, right? Like if you give a skier too much, and we're all, I mean, I'm king of that, where I would have, you know, a long time ago, I would have overwhelmed these skiers with so many concepts. And then you get to the end of the lake, so that, you know, they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do all that. And they get out in the water. You get to the end of the pass, and I call it deer in headlights. You know, they're looking at you, and now their entire framework has been blown up. And in a way, you just overwhelm them with too much information. And then I believe as you evolve as a coach is what you're talking about. And you realize that it's really about giving them that one or two things that they need, and then spending the time to have them really understand what's going on at that time, why it's so important, and really having more discussions off the water about that stuff than necessarily like translating that and trying to say, see, now you run this many more buoys, or you can ski more passes because you're not sore or tired or whatever that is. So yeah, that's a balance that every coach has to go through, and has to see their skier and make sure that you're not overwhelming them. And I mean, one little sidebar I'd just like to say, like for me, you know, when Water Ski Magazine was a thing, you know, I was approached to do articles here and there, and I loved writing for the magazine because I just loved that magazine, and it is no longer. But one of the things that I basically told him is I want to be able to write an article for you every month, so that the skiers get to hear a continuous story throughout the whole year, so that if they sign up for this kind of concept, that they can progress with it, and not just hear like, oh, Rossi says this, Wade Cox says that, Andy Mapple says this, Drew Ross says this, and all of a sudden they get into that deer in headlights thing where they're working on two different concepts that, you know, while they will help their skiing, they don't know how to put the two concepts together. And I think that's one of the great things that we have now. You know, people are choosing their news the way they want to hear their news. Well, the same thing now, they can choose to listen to Spraymakers if they want, and they can get on the program and try that program and see if it works for them. And I think it's really nice to be able to have a constant voice all the time to share with people and to keep them on one path versus them jumping past left and right and trying to figure out what works. And that's just, it can be really frustrating, and it can be, you can get really lost really quickly.
Yeah. Trent, speaking of path, right? Do you guys, at least for season 1, I'm asking now that you're recording season 2, do you also plan the sequence of episodes? Like, how do you guys make it out, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, season 1, you know, we didn't have it mapped out per se. You know, I think, you know, our experience as coaches just kind of led us. Season 2, it's, you know, it's the exact same formula, except for we do have more structure, and the way Rossi and I did it was you know, we sat down before season 2 started recording, and we just bounced the question back and forth to one another. Like, as a coach, when you sit in the boat, whether it's, you know, you're watching Stephen Neveu or you're watching Matteo, or you're watching, you know, Rossi, you're watching your son ski, what's the first thing that catches your eye? You know, and whether it's, you know, if it's Matteo, that bottom level thing is probably going to be perfect. But if it's an amateur skier, that first thing that catches your eye, that's going to be the first thing you address. What's the second thing that catches your eye? The third thing, and so we're going to it's going to be a little more linear this year in that, because again, myself included, or you, that first thing that Rossi or I is going to look for. It's still the most important thing. So, it's still nice to hear that reminder. But yeah, it's going to be a little more hierarchical in building this pyramid, where the more abstract stuff, A, is going to come later in the season, and because B, it's not as important as the base level fundamental stuff. So yeah, there's a little more structure this year, but it's the same thing where, we hop on and we know where we are in the in the progression of things, but it's still just two buddies, coaches talking about skiing, and that's what's another thing that's selfishly is at the end of the session, at the end of the season. As a skier, I've learned more, and as a coach, I've learned more just through having these conversations. So, but yes, a little more structure this year, but the same essential formula.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to think it's selfish because obviously you notice the gain too, but I want to venture in saying that's why people enjoy listening to this, to this or any other podcast. Like when they feel that the people in it are truly, engaged, not just engaging, but engaged, and they love having that conversation. Like some of the feedback I've had was, wow, I felt like I was having a beer with you guys, So that's when I sort of learned that keeps you, that you're on the right track, essentially.
Yeah. I guess it's authenticity is pretty easy to recognize.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We have a. I mean, I think the real important thing is that our plan is no plan other than we have a general outline of the season and where we want to go with it. But I mean, we literally, if you want the inside scoop, Trent and I jump on and we probably talk for 3 or 4 minutes before we start the Spraymakers episode, and just like recap what we talked about the last time, and then what's the next level of where we want to go with it from there. And then that's literally all we talk about, and then it's just off the cuff go. And that's why we end up in these rabbit holes, and we end up going sideways a little bit, because there isn't a script. There isn't a whole outline that we're going to do for each event or for each episode. So, and I think in that realm, you'll see us get caught, where I might not know exactly how to respond to Trent when he says something, and I have to think about it and work through it. But in doing so, you're bringing the listeners along on that ride. And, I think you also get to understand, I don't know about Trent, but for me, coaching has always been the most important of all things. I loved being a pro skier. I loved all of that. But the incremental change that we can make in our skiing, a whole season can be spent on, trying to learn how to take more speed into the center line, or how to have better handle control out to the buoy or whatever. And the end result for us is like, if you get a quarter buoy better, you're stoked.
If you're pulling to the next buoy,
so you get this ability to affect people's skiing. And for me, that's always been the draw. I've always wanted to bring people along on my ride. I've always felt so blessed to have been on any of these rides. So yeah, it's just a off the cuff, nice and easy discussion about, like I said earlier, like some pretty high level stuff, but spoken in a way that we hope is approachable and understandable.
Yeah, digestible for sure. As I said before, by pretty much all levels. Now, tell me the first few episodes, some things that went wrong. Like, just give me the idea of when you guys started, because my understanding is you guys don't produce it, right? Like, you record your audio and then you send it somewhere for it to become a podcast episode.
Yeah.
But how were the first few sessions? Like, did you find yourself coughing in the mic, or what happened?
I don't know. I guess probably our listeners would probably know better than that. I know there was the odd inadvertent curse word, slurping coffee. A couple just had to be completely re-recorded because I don't know. If you're not over 40, you don't really understand what happens to your brain as it relates to technology. Like, I was a whiz crack until 39, and I'm done. So I mean, more.
You are recording this audio, right? You are recording. Okay, perfect.
Wait.
Just check. Okay.
I had my wife turn on the computer for me, so we should be okay. But I think there probably wasn't, outside the tech stuff and just the odd, small thing like that. I think because Chris and I, we're of, well, I was gonna say similar age. I think we're the exact same age, and our experience levels are very similar, and our paths are very similar. In terms of both northern kids who grew up, trying to do exactly this, and our paths were both heavily focused through, or on coaching through the height of our career. We just had enough similarities and enough history. We've been working together since 2006, right? So
long time.
We've been doing it too long. I think it was probably more natural than it could have been under different circumstances.
Okay. Yeah, for me, technology is always the thing. I had a different mic last year. I am very hard of hearing. I actually got hearing aids this year. I'm not using them today. So anyway, for me, just learning how to do this that way, we had a lot of episodes where my audio was just way too loud compared to Trent's. And then, the bummer is that these were not scripted. So we would get to the end of an episode and we're like, man, that was a banging episode. People are going to love that. And then, it comes back that my audio is too loud and we need to re-record, and literally it's like taking the wind out of your sail. You're like, we had so many great examples and we went down so many great places. How do we reproduce that? And then I think the other thing, at the beginning last year, we were using a different platform that also we started by being able to record us visually as well as audio. And we were having glitching with internet issues. And so you'd be talking and all of a sudden I could see Trent wasn't there, and then you got to fix. But I don't know how long ago he wasn't there. And then you'd have to hit pause and then Trent would come back. And then you're like, wait, where was I? How do I clip back into that place? And how do I more importantly than that though, is how do I mentally get back to where I was and where we were taking the listeners, and to get back into that when you have to chop it all the time. And so we ditched that platform and went to a new one and went strictly audio, and that seemed to help. I actually like it. We're on Zoom right now chatting with each other, and I like that we can look at each other, but this is a new realm for me because normally I'm just staring at a screen, just listening in my earbud to Trent, and today I get to look at you guys. And I'm like, whoa, this is a whole new realm here. Wow. So you guys record audio and just talk audio, like if you were talking on the phone. Yes.
Yep.
Old school, insane. Bro. Old school.
I had forgotten about that though. The first 4 episodes literally took us 6 weeks to get 4 episodes done. Because it just every time we would try, it would crash, and again, like Rossi was saying, we were using a platform that required far greater bandwidth, and it was like during part of the season where I was traveling a lot, and so I'd get to Hotel A and oh great, it worked, I can't believe it worked, and then I would be at the boarding school the next week and oh crap, it's not working, and like it was like there was a moment where we were teetering like, I don't think we're gonna do this. I mean, if it took us this long to do 4 episodes and we're gonna do 30, like. It's going to take us years.
So that was the request by Brooks, like 30 episodes a year?
I don't know if it was really laid out that structured or not. That's just where we ended up. But I mean, we had decided that if we were going to do this, that we weren't going to just drop them sort of haphazardly or randomly. Like there needed to be, like any good coaching scenario, there needed to be structure, or there needed to be a plan like we always talk about. So, I mean, from the start, we had said, if, Rossi and I talking about, if we're going to do this, it's got to be consistent. Even if we don't go 12 months of the year, when we're on, like our guys and girls, our listeners need to know that every Monday morning they're going to have new material. That's going to be, a continuation from the previous Monday.
And so for season 1, how far ahead we recording would you guys try to stay? Like 3 weeks, 2 weeks, a month? Like how were you doing it? Or was it record this week, out next week?
It was a little more off the cuff, like we were just trying to, we would get ahead sometimes, maybe one or two, or probably 2 shows ahead sometimes. But really, it kind of felt like in season 1 that we were always trying to record to stay current. And if we got ahead one, that felt great. But then all of a sudden, you had 1 week where Trent was really busy with clinics and traveling, or I was traveling, or whatever. And then all of a sudden, you're like, oh my gosh, it's Thursday, and we need a Monday show. We got to get going,
Right.
And
Right.
so there was an element of pressure on our ends just to make sure to produce the material so that we stayed on track. We're getting better at that, and we won't be quite so chasing this season. So,
but isn't that? I mean, I don't know. It sounds like this may resonate with you guys, but that pressure is pressure. It's strange. Like, because I, for instance, put one out. I try every Tuesday. And that Tuesday that for whatever reason it's not out, I feel like I let people down. Like it's strange. It's strange how it works that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, anything that you can. So we're recording this is March 4th. This is probably going to be out next week. Can you give us any sort of snippet? Like anything off the stove about season 2, anything that you want?
Well, I think we're coming. I believe it's going to be March 15th, or whatever that that graduating into the 3rd week of March is when we're going to start, and really it's like like we discussed, it's going to be we're going to do a much better job of making sure that each episode lends itself to the next episode, and again, like without really planning that, it mostly did that last season 1, but there was a little bit of jumping around that in hindsight, we weren't real happy with. So we're going to look for it to be just a little more concise and a little more, step 1, 2, 3, kind of the, and again, like we said, as we view skiers as coaches, that's how we want the season to flow. But also, as we kind of look at our own skiing, like how does the season flow? Like, okay, the first set of the year, what am I doing? At what point are we really being honest with ourselves and coming up with a plan that we're going to stick with? And then, at what point in the season do we even start thinking about fin setup? And then when are we doing, when do we start really thinking about tournaments? And so it's going to mirror not only our coaching approaches, but it's going to do a pretty good job, I hope, of mirroring how we approach our own ski season.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. It's yeah. First episodes, we're going to be talking a lot more about what the beginning of the season looks like, what goal setting, and, we'll talk about, a lot of structural points, highlight some things like Trent said earlier, when you look at a pro skier and you see them on their first set, you're going to see that stack or that position, and how do others, focus and get to that place. So we're trying to build our listeners basically fill them in on how our brains work, how our seasons are approached, how we'd like to see their seasons approached. And, just take away that randomness, that first 6 weeks. Right now we want to talk a lot about that first 6 weeks, and what do those sets look like? And you're not defined by your buoy count in those times. You're defined more about this is the time of year to be getting going and to establish new habits and new routines. So, we want to start by getting that base in there, and then we'll progress further and further along with techniques and tournaments if tournaments are your thing. And we're kind of build you a system so that you can come up with your own, but that you can use some of our insight to help you get there.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that was really important to Chris, because as a ski designer, he's obviously wanting, Corey Vaughn to run 41, but he's also wanting like your weekend ripper to have a better ride. So anyway, where I'm going is as a designer, the entire spectrum of abilities is important to Chris, and he he wanted to make sure that we did a better job this year of making sure that our language was going to be all inclusive, across, the full spectrum of ability levels. So if you're a core skier, great. If you're a world champion, great. But if you're a lake skier, an open water skier, these same principles apply. And he does a good job of reminding me, and he does a good job himself of making sure to be all inclusive with the way some of these points are illustrated.
Yeah. So we're thinking of going back for a second to season 1, and you can take your sweet time to think about it. But I want to hear your favorite episode. Now, that can mean anything. It could mean you've had the most feedback, it was the most fun chatting about that topic, whatever. Your favorite episode from season 1. And I'll be taking notes so that I'll go and re-listen to that one.
If you're asking me, they're all there. You know what I mean? Like everyone was a learning experience for us. So for me, I think every episode that we recorded Trent and I got more on page, and then it became, something that it builds and builds. I think for me personally, I remember just distinctly, we were talking about gates on one of our episodes, and Trent dropped some knowledge about, his relationship to the left-hand gate ball, where, for my whole life I've been focused on right-hand gate ball. And I just remember when he was dropping his, he was just going on his normal tangent. But for me, I'm sitting there and like, I just want to hit the boom button like 20 times so people can just hear like, or the train horn going on like, boom, this is it. And we do try I try to, when I hear Trent drop something like that, I try to like stop and be like, hey, listeners, that just blew my mind. So I'm really hoping that it's resonating with you. So for me, it's those little moments for me in episodes that it's just as much fun for myself to listen to and to banter back and forth with Trent and hear how his brain works. As it is like to choose one episode. It's more like the little tidbits that get thrown in there that you just boom, that's the thing for me. That's just, it's so much fun. And I think that's a big part of why the listeners really like it too, is they have that boom moment where they go, oh, I can do that too.
And you know what's funny? You guys do it, at least in my experience listening to it, you do it in a completely different way. Because Chris, just silence. And then you reflect on it, Whereas Trent just goes, yes, just in lights. It's super cool to see. What about you, Trent?
Probably it'd be two. Like one is it like that gate episode was really fun for me because it was a really concise way of thinking about it that I had only recently arrived to, and then talking about it with Chris, it really confirmed what I had only recently in the last couple of years it had really been drawing towards, and it got a heck of a lot of feedback. I got a lot of questions asked about it, and then the other one would have been that we did one on just tournament preparedness, or I can't remember exactly what it was titled, but it was getting how to get ready for tournament as it applied specifically to game day, and it was just that episode came out, and then the next week I was chief driver at a tournament up in Dallas, and I mean I had so many people seek me out, that morning just to be kind of go over a few things that we had just talked about. It had just come out on that Monday, I believe. And so that was like super rewarding. And then in recording that one, I remember we had shared some of our own experiences, and I was able to share, and it was like super cathartic. I was able to share, like, for me, instances in the past when I had completely blown it. But now to be at this age looking back, to be able to identify exactly how I messed it up, and to be able to identify that it was like it was a lack of confidence, and then that was exhibited as maybe hubris that allowed, or that forced me into making these mistakes over and over and over again. And I thought, like, to be able to share that with someone and maybe help help them avoid making those mistakes. I was like, oh man, this is like, if we're doing this for a reason, this is definitely one of the reasons. So those two parts were, you know what, one other thing, and this one, Rossi, I never told you this, but you had talked about as a righty, and it was really specific in terms of mechanics, but as a right foot forward skier moving into their gate glide, about how you talked about breaking wind with your left shoulder, correct? And then there was two righties on my lake that pulled me aside and wanted to discuss that like at length specifically, and then they credit just that one little thing at completely changing their approach to their gate setup, and then having, getting to watch them and coach them, they were absolutely right. So that's what's kind of cool about this too, is I'm guilty of going very big picture, very cause and effect, and almost purposefully ignoring those little crunchy things, and it's something I'm trying to get better at. But when Rossi dropped this crunchy thing, go ahead and, if you're right foot forward, you can lead with that left shoulder in your gate glide. That completely changed something for two of my guys. So back to kind of like what Rossi was saying, often it's just things like that. It's moments like that were really, really rewarding.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, it's funny how both as a skier and as a coach, I find myself bouncing between the two things. Like, so the 30,000 feet picture, because I need to see how to pull better to that ball or how to approach my gate in a more consistent way. And then sometimes it's that one thing that I thought about that one time and worked. So you go, well, let's think about it again and see if it still works. And it still works. You don't quite understand why yet, but at a certain point, you're like, maybe I stick with it, and hopefully I understand why. Therein
lies the challenge, right? That's the challenge, and I think that's what separates a good coach from a great coach is. So then I look at that Rossi's nugget of being okay to leave with that left shoulder. But then okay, why though? Like what is that actually doing to your weight distribution? What is that actually doing to X or your AB that's resulting in C? And then that goes back to teaching versus instructing, so
right.
That's a huge thing that Trent kind of brought up to me, which I like, is that we are teaching, not instructing. This isn't exactly how to do it. It's just a discussion on how we do it, and to give that oversight so that each skier can try to listen to the way we talk about it, and then understand it conceptually, that 30,000 foot view. And then find, we just banter back and forth on how we accomplish those things, and hopefully between the two of us, our listeners can formulate or understand or relate to what we're talking about, and find a way to get to that place. And if it is just a little break wind with the left shoulder, that's great. I mean, we could spend a whole episode into why that is what it is. But it's really fun, and I would totally agree with you. Before you even started talking, Trent, I was thinking, that episode about tournaments and being able to share, why do you see me walking the shore, before an event? Yeah, I'm nervous. I need to move. I don't like sitting there stewing about what's about to happen. Like, I need to do something, so I'm going to go, move around, or look at the water conditions, or go for my run, and I would say we had a lot of feedback on that one from our tournament listeners. But like you said earlier, Trent, the goal here is to help everybody progress. And, we don't spend enough time talking about our open water skiers, but we are trying to do our best to relate. And we do some episodes talking about that stuff. And, we're just always trying to relate back to anybody that is listening, and if they can take little nuggets from it. So it's really important.
Yeah. Look, guys, I just have a question about more of podcasting, and I'll ask it to you, Chris, first, because I've asked a similar question to Trent a few months ago. But obviously, all three of us speaking, super fans of the magazine, right? And then the magazine goes away, and we're all thirsty for content, right? And it seems to me that podcasting has brought a new wave of content about water skiing, right? what was your relationship with the medium when you started? Like, were you listening to podcasts? Was it just like, oh, let's do a podcast, Chris? What is it? Like, what was it like for you when you guys started?
So I'm not in the past, I wasn't a huge podcast listener. I would seek out certain episodes of Joe Rogan or whatever, just based on content. Yeah. And I found myself really stimulated. And, my wife and I, we do Sundance Film Festival every year, and we love doing it. And we do it for the documentaries, so that you're getting different insights into smaller, more finite topics, and you get to really dive into them. And when we get done that film festival, the thing that we feel is energized and kind of, it's like to me, I think of it as it happens at the end of January, but for me that's like my new year, because I'm now all of a sudden I've watched all these documentaries on all this new topics that I didn't even know about. I mean, it might be about Syria, or it might be, it might be about farming in the US and how 90% of our beef comes from 4 farms or whatever that is. And then it makes me want to go down that rabbit hole. And then, so when podcasting came up, yeah, it was a little bit like, what do I need to, I just went and, I did the typical thing. I went on Amazon, I bought a highly rated microphone and figured out how to plug it in, and then it sounded like crap. And we blew through way too many episodes with me yelling into the mic and it sounding terrible. And, but since then, I think it was the evolution of what was going to happen, and so timing wise for us, it was a good time. I wish we had started a little earlier, now that we're rolling, I just really like how we connect with people and are giving another avenue. I used to write a lot of articles for, let's say Water Ski Magazine, Water Skier Magazine. They signed up for my concept of having a whole year of me writing, and I really enjoyed that. And so I helped support that magazine. I just got my water ski journal with Jamie Beauchesne on the cover. So, it's nice to have another water ski, related magazine available out there. And if you don't know it, then, check it out, Water Ski Journal. But, when you write, the one thing when I evaluate how I write, I think the reason why people liked my articles so much was that I wrote in an approachable way. I write how I talk. Mm-hmm. So this is a easier way for me to be able to, a much less time consuming way. Now that we obviously have gotten through a lot of our podcasting issues, it's actually an easier way for me to get those concepts, pumped out there. And then also it's the little things that we talk about. It's those, whatever Trent just called the crunch, you don't always write the crunch into the article because you don't know that it's actually that important until you're bouncing it with somebody else. So in a way, I think it's a more effective way of communicating our thoughts to skiers and to enthusiasts.
Yeah, that's cool. What about you, Trent? Were you listening to podcasts before doing Spraymakers? Did it come after you started doing it?
No, a little bit. I'm really just mostly like ESPN garbage, and it's actually a really bad habit of mine is I fall asleep listening to ESPN garbage, and they're all the same, and I love them. I love American sports, but really that was about it. Obviously the same thing. Seek out a Joe Rogan when there was something applicable or something that was appealing, but not a whole bunch. Lately, a whole bunch of fly fishing podcasts.
Right.
So right. I'm turning into like a super nerd in that way. But yeah, not a whole bunch. I think, like Rossi was saying, I think, after the magazine went away and then, there was a voice that I had that went away with it. This, the idea of doing this was super appealing. And like Chris was saying, it's, you can learn a lot, you can teach a lot through writing, but it's like that reciprocity. It's that, like, Rossi will say something and I'll ask him a question, what he meant by that. And then I'll ask him, is it kind of like this, or I'll say something. He's like, yes, that's exactly what I mean by it. Like, so that back and forth just gives such a more complete picture and just a better learning environment, than just simply, me or Chris or you just crafting something on paper, and it's a little more static, and it's a little harder to learn that way.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's, part of it is like, in my opinion, the complexity of slalom skiing requires a little bit more time, like even just a well edited 4-pager might not get to what you're trying to get. Mm-hmm. But also I think it's also easier to fit podcasting into things in your life, like notoriously driving, or for me, laundry, like whatever things that you can listen and pay attention to an audio while doing something repetitive, then you get a chance to learn or be entertained, right? But I was curious to hear, like, if it was something, maybe you guys were super stoked about podcasting before, and then you said, oh, got to do one. Kind of came as you started doing it. Yeah. Nice.
I mean, I understood the medium, and like I said, I did listen to something daily, but it wasn't. I didn't, other than just as a tool to go to sleep. I wasn't really seeking out information, like I do now, based on what Chris and I have done.
Yeah. Super cool. Look, one last question that I have. It's very simple. What is exciting you about the sport now? And I ask you this because you guys have been in the sport for a long time, right? And it always fascinates me how the sport has been changing, in the years that I've been doing it. But anything specific that excites you nowadays?
I'll start with that one. For me, what's really exciting is seeing concepts that I helped develop, and Trent was part of this too. Early 2000s, there was what we called old school technique. I mean, it was pretty much a one way to do things, and your Mapples and your Wade Coxes were the kings of that technique. And then through my friendship with Jamie Beauchesne and also just my always curiosity on how to do things better, we came up with new techniques that we were writing about. It was like a I mean, I don't want to call it like a revolution, but ultimately we were breaking off from what was the given and going into the space that was the unknown. And we believed there was better than what we had. And so, so much time and effort went into that, and it was really exciting. I mean, I had some seasons where I took a step back where people were like, well, you were better on tour last year than this year. And I said, well, I'm working towards something different, and I can see my end goal. And so, to hammer through that, and some call it new school style, some call it, Wade Williams called it NE style, as in New England style. West Coast slalom fits right into that. To me, it was like a new age of water skiing, and it was so exciting for me to forge that path with my buds and also on my own. And where I'm going with this is that, during that time, I remember working with Ty Openlander, and he was just a young kid then that was a ripper. And I could see that he was going to be something special. And, I remember having a conversation with him and telling him, like, you're going to be better than me. And he looked at me like, there's no possible way. Like, no. And I'm like, yeah, you're going to be better than me. And all the people younger than you are going to be better than you, because you're going to be when you first learn skiing for you're going to learn this new school style of skiing as your go-to. Whereas for me, being a guy who grew up more in the old school, I'm 44 now, feel 24, but or at least my mind thinks I'm 24. But you know how that goes. But and now to watch skiing, now I get to see all of these young skiers out there, and it's happening. And just see how easy they run the passes that they're running. If we're talking about the high level pro young skiers, their efficiency is through the roof. They have very little of the things that hold me back, because I learned, my go-tos when I hit the oh crap button, are going to go back to that deep rooted survival. And if you grow up having not been taught that, but you're taught this, new school style or West Coast slalom or however we want to call it, if your oh crap button is in that realm, then you're so much further ahead than we were when this started. So for me, like so it's just so exciting to see this transformation and see how many people are skiing so well, and I'm just excited for where the sport's going.
Yeah, it's cool because I mean, I remember those years well as a junior skier. But now there are skiers out there who were born in those years, and basically that's how they grew up, right? That's what they were being taught, and you do see it in the younger generation. It's super cool.
Oh, that's a really good point. Like you look at like kids like Ryan Canepa, and that's what's really cool. I think for years everyone was so they were so bent out of shape about what we no longer were that. They weren't focusing on what we are and what we have and what we actually do, right? Like, are we on ESPN? No, we're never going to be on ESPN again, and because that's not our platform, that's not important. It doesn't matter. We're never going to be on TV again. Not in the way we used to be, but nothing is on TV in the way that it used to be. So like people have spent, even recently, we've spent so long focused on what water skiing wasn't instead of what it is. So what I think is really cool, and the trick skiers are the same. They're like, be damned if I only have 5 events this year, don't care. Trickers are the best example, the trick skiers. Look how good these guys are. And they have like 1 or 2 tournaments a year,
Right.
and they're mind blowing. And it's the same thing. You watch these little kids run 39 off, like it's absolutely nothing. And they're like, a generation and a half ago, like maybe it was the allure of TV and money that was doing it. Now it's not even a full schedule of pro events, and they're driven. 1, and then 2, the resurgence of these pro events that I just said we don't really need. Like what y'all did in Europe, the season before last, and how it's trickled over here. Like there's more events now than there has been in the previous 6 or 8, 10 years. So it's maybe it's that realization that maybe it's taking a little bit of pride in what we actually have and what we are instead of so worried about what we used to be. It's kind of driving it again,
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I think it's, I've said it before, like I think in the last 2 or 3 years, we are seeing a little bit of a uprising in the sport. And by that, I mean on all levels of the pyramid, from more people learning 41 to more people buying entry-level skis and joining clubs and going to ski school and, buying gloves. But I think, possibly what has allowed us to get there is to realize where we are now as a sport and build off of that rather than living in the past and trying to be what we once were. Yeah.
That's a tough one not to get pulled into. People always have a vision of what it used to be or what things are, but it's called evolution, and I'm really enjoying where we're at with skiing. For me as a ski designer, it's really important to always think of a person's first time they're ever skiing all the way through, them reaching their goals of, if that's being a pro or whatever. And it's really important to, help people along the way. And we're seeing, more ski sales than we have in many years, like you just said. And the sport, I think people want to knock the sport and say, oh, we're not as big as we used to be. Well, you know what? Maybe we're not as visual as we used to be, as in, a mainstream television. We've got some great new webcasts and production going on that really help to highlight what we do. And, it's just about having a love for this and wanting to progress. And I think the place we're in right now is a wonderful place for people. It's so approachable, and there's so much knowledge that I never had growing up to be able to come up with my own plans to progress. So it's a wonderful time to be in water skiing. It's a wonderful time to be in a lot of things. And like I said, we've got a wealth of knowledge out there available to people, and there's lots of platforms to be able to reach out.
Yeah, well, look, I don't think I could have ended it better. It's a wonderful time to be in water skiing. I fully agree. I mean, I mean, to me, it has always been, but now even more so. Guys, man, thank you so much. This was a fun chat. So March 15th, you said the season 2 of Spraymaker will be out.
Yes, sir. I mean, and sorry, the 15th may not be the actual date.
I think it is actually. That's Monday.
But yeah, it's going to be the follow the start of the third week of March. Yes.
Okay, so Monday is the day that the Spraymaker comes out. Perfect. Oh, that's great.
Hey, I also wanted to give you a shout out, man. I've not being a big podcast guy, I do my little Joe Rogans here and there, pick and choose them, but it's been nice. I enjoy listening to your podcast. It is really fun to see where you go with your interviews, and there's a lot of knowledge being dropped there too. So
thank you.
A, congrats, and B, keep going.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the plan. Keep going. It's the frequency and being consistent with it is the challenging part. But if I get to have conversations like this one, man, it's all worth the diligence.
Awesome. Well, good luck.
Thanks a lot, guys.